Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Eran Kinsbruner. I'm a Chief Evangelist for Perfecto, which is a Perforce company. I'm thrilled to have today with me David Kampschafer from one of the leading financial institutions in the United States. And he's here today with me to talk about how his bank leveraged the right tools to accelerate testing for mobile, native, and web applications. Hi David, how are you?
Pretty good, thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you, and I love the topic that we're going to be talking about today. It's very exciting, especially in this world of fast-paced development cycles.
Awesome. So before we just start with the agenda and the introduction, just a few housekeeping information. This webinar is being recorded, so both the recording and the content, the slides, will be shared with all of you online. Thank you for joining us. David, if you don't mind, just introduce yourself. What have you seen so far in the industry, your role at the bank, and any other things that you have to share with us?
Okay. I always like to introduce myself so you know where I'm coming from. My name is David Kampschafer. I've been in this industry about 30-plus years. I've worked for a number of different companies, from Palm, HP, Apple. I've worked for the Department of Defense. I've been around a long time. I've seen automation start where you're writing code and actually building it. We actually did that at Apple. We built the tool to do automation before automation was a thing to do. So watching the development of automation and do automation testing is very, very exciting. Like I said, the companies I work for are very big companies. I've worked for small companies. I've built and had a privilege of helping create a number of QA departments along the way and improve the way we do testing, meeting the people in the industry that are trying to bring innovation to what we do as QA engineers. So it's a very exciting topic that we're talking about today, something that I think people really need to know about and to think about. And through this talk, you'll see the challenges of the financial institution I work for. They went through this exercise to get where they are and moving forward. And I think everyone needs to at least look at this and consider what they want to do and where they want to go. So without further ado, let's jump in and get going.
Sure, and let's start, with the history and what led you, to come up with your current strategy.
Okay, so here's the goal. They started with build the highest quality applications with the velocity required in today's digital landscape. Admirable, I will admit, but it doesn't really tell you much of anything. And it's hard. The goal should be something that can be measured, because otherwise, how do you know that you got there? So this is what they started with when we brought in mobile, because that's what I was brought in for. Being the lead for mobile and cloud, this was a challenge. So, and as I said, with this goal, we did come across some challenges. And it was a two-part challenge. One of them was for development, and the other one was for QA. But let's talk about development first. The bank development strategy was in its infancy. I mean, they didn't really know. They had never really developed an application for a mobile device. So they did what a lot of companies do. They turn to an outside development company. Not a bad idea, because for the short term, you get a job done. But it does present some challenges. Challenge one, security compliance. Now, because we are a financial institution, there's a lot of security we have to be concerned about with customer data and all of that. So you have developers that are working outside the company's firewall, working with data that may or may not have been what we call scrubbed or taken out important information. And it complicates being able to test early releases of the candidate of what they're working for, because you have to go, how do we go about doing this? Do we email it to somebody or what? In addition to that challenge, development, QA, and the product teams are all utilizing their own devices, which means they don't have devices that they can share. You know, if I say, I've got this Google Pixel device here, take a look at this, see what the idea is, the development may not even have a Pixel device. So you're trying to coordinate all of this. Time constraints, communication and sharing of the application and information was not always up to date. You usually sometimes try to do an email. Okay, I've got this problem. Now, depending upon where your team is, and we at the bank that I work for, we have an outside or offshore team that's in India. That's 12 and a half hours difference. So we're hoping that if they find something, they send an email, and hopefully the developer gets it, and you can kind of see where it starts breaking down. And that's not good. The other thing is tracking the quality and collaboration issues. Onshore and offshore teams are not having real-time visibility into the team testing status, or internals are relying on bug tracking systems, but the offshore or development may not have the same access. So you have to come out with alternatives such as email, which we all know is not the most reliable. And then you have a reactive mode. You're always reacting because of something. I've got the build, I'm testing it. Oh, we just got a new OS release. Oh, now it's not working. This was very common for Samsung devices, because especially in Android, because what Samsung would do is they would take the kernel and recompile it. So something that may have worked on, 6 different Android devices, if I got to a Samsung, all of a sudden it broke. Now, the development team might not have a Samsung because no one has one. How do you do that? So you get this challenge and this always reacting to what's going on and going back and forth, which is not good. So that was the development challenges. With QA, they had some similar types of development as well. The bank strategy for mobile was literally a manual process, if you can imagine that. We utilize full-time testers, which is great, but the problem is you have people who are just manual, who are just pushing buttons, following a script, and just doing that. Which means that if it takes you an hour to do a set of tests on one device, and you're doing it manually, and business says, these are the 6 devices that we need tested, your choice is getting 6 people to do it all at once, or if you have a smaller team, dividing up the devices and doing it. We didn't have a big team. So that means people had to take 2 devices or 3 devices and do the testing on them. And as I said, 1 hour on one device, the math is easy. It's going to take you 3 hours just to do 3 devices. Time constraints. Again, here we are. It's intensive. It's prone to human error. And as it increases, now you're starting to have roadblocks. You're now not going to do 6 devices. Oh, that becomes more and more time-consuming. Also, if they do a quick fix and then business says we need to test it on all of them, everything else stops. There's no way to do it in parallel. Again, the same thing with development, tracking quality and collaboration issues, onshore, offshore, especially offshore. You don't have access to the same devices. So now we're trying to kind of figure out, is it happening on this or is it happening on that? And again, no real-time visibility into what's going on. No way to sharing the results immediately or say, hey, go look this up with offshore developers, because they're not on the same system. And as I said before, you're in a reactive approach. Everything is I'm trying to get through this script. You can imagine doing that, going through the script line by line by line. And then all of a sudden, a new OS comes out. Now you've got to either finish what you're doing or jump onto that. So now you're having to delay things because you're having to go back and redo it, go back and redo it. And sometimes it's late in the process, so sometimes decisions are made that shouldn't be made. So with the development and QA challenges, we decided to do an investigation. And I feel that this is really what teams need to do. They really need to sit down and look at the investigation instead of saying, oh, we want this. So what we did was we looked at a number of solutions. One of them was literally a hardware model mobile lab. And there are a couple of out there, and basically what this is the big box that has like a server on it, and then you plug devices into it, and then you run your testing on it, and the box sits there and helps you figure out which device you want. That's great, but number one, you have to own the devices. Number two, you have to have somewhere to plug it in. And since we were a financial institution, the big concern was having access to our internal network, which gave access to customer data. And people were not thrilled about that. But that was something we looked into. We looked into building our own framework. We said, okay, we can do this. We have programmers. I was a former programmer before I became QA, way back when, going back in the span of time, my younger self. We looked at Java, Ruby, Python, and there are a lot of frameworks for doing automation and being able, and there are tools out there and libraries to be able to do automation on mobile devices. But we were also looking at web. We wanted to somehow bring that in so we had more of one solution. So we looked at the languages. We looked at tools, Selenium, Appium, Calabash, tools like that. Calabash was a non-starter for us because it requires you to compile it into the source for the application. And we said the idea of QA is not to touch the source code so that if later on down the road there's a problem, we can just test it as it is. So we looked at the tools. We looked at IDEs or development environments, Eclipse and BBEdit. We looked at code libraries. We took our time to look at this. And then the very end, once we did all of this, we also looked at companies who provided the technology, such as Perfecto or Sauce Labs or some of the others that are now coming out. And we put it up on the board. I mean, we had in a sense, a war room where we had it on the board and going, what are the pros? What are the cons? And we also had to run it through our information security group of saying, what are they going to allow us? What are they not going to allow us? So it was an investigation that I felt was very, very useful because it basically said, where do we need to look at? What do we need to focus on? It really came out and helped us really focus. And because right now in today's market, the idea is fast, be fast, react fast. And the problem is that people get caught up in that. And they don't do their due diligence at the beginning. And we wanted to make sure that we did it right, because there's a saying that, never enough time to do it right, always enough time to do it, to fix it. And that's something we didn't want to do. We wanted to do it right from the beginning. So let's go into, once doing this investigation, this was the decision that we came. We decided on Perfecto, and there were three reasons. Were security, because Perfecto was able to assure us, and believe me, this was a interesting journey, and Perfecto took it with us, of showing that no matter what, Perfecto was secure, that we met the requirements of our information security team. And believe me, we went back and forth a number of times with them, and Perfecto was right there with us. They were calm about it. We were getting frustrated, but together we prevailed because every time they asked for something, we go, here it is. Oh, well, what about it? Here it is. What about here it is? And finally, they were like, go for it. They integrated with Microsoft Visual Studio because that was some of the stuff that was being used, some of the tools that were being used as it was in the bank. So they were showing us how we could integrate with that, which was great. That means we didn't have to try to come up with a new strategy for doing that. And it showed us the direct support of Selenium for mobile devices. That means we're not, for the people that know how to work with Selenium, it wasn't, oh, now you've got to learn this new thing. It was very, very simple. And as I said, every time we had a security question, Perfecto was able to reassure us and show us. It wasn't, oh yeah, not a problem. They showed us. Here it is. They were there. I mean, they came to the office at times to show. They provided us code. Whatever we needed, they were there. And it was the only one at the time that showed the integration between Visual Studio and Selenium. That was perfect. So we made our decision, and let's move on to once we've made the decision, where we go. Now, the beauty of this, and I think this is one of the important slides, and I've talked about this before in other talks that I've done, that there were byproducts of our investigation and decision. And these are some of the byproducts. It was the development of best practices, not only for development and QA, but for automation as well. Things such as having a repository for the code. Some people don't think about that. How are you going to have a check-in, check-out, so you make sure that it's there? Is it going to be easy to do, looking forward to CI/CD? That's something we wanted to do. We had a better insight into the development process. Because we were wanting to bring this inside, now we knew what we needed to do. We had better insights to QA. That was what was interesting as well, because one of the things that people do with automation is it's always an afterthought. Well, you do the testing, and then when you have time, you can do the automation. That was something that said, no, that doesn't work. That was something that one of the insights for the QA process that development and a lot of product managers found out about. Better collaboration between the teams. We had to talk. That was a must. We had to go back and forth. We had to improve our system. We had better seamlessness between desktop, web, and mobile. And because of all of our investigation and working with and asking questions, the byproduct was being able to run multiple VMs as well as multiple mobile devices. So instead of having one desktop per automation, with Perfecto, now we can do a number of virtual machines and treat it like a mobile device. We just run a test on it. Oh, we'll run this test. That was a win-win for us, and I try to promote that when I talk about it, because these are important. Because if you don't get this down now, these are your foundation. As you move along, automation is going to be more fragile as you move, because your base isn't stable. So from our byproducts, we moved right into doing this, and we'll show you some of the results of this, the byproducts, and how they actually work. So we do mobile web, and desktop framework. We actually have 2 frameworks. And what we did was, if you look on the far right, this was our native mobile app framework that Perfecto helped us develop. Then if you start moving to your left, you'll see that it says mobile web. And it's very similar to the native. And then if you look over at the web browser, it looks very similar as well. And we did this for a reason. Number one, maintenance would be a lot easier. 2, if you're moving from one to another, you're not having to learn how the layouts are. And that's very important. Documentation becomes easier. This is another wonderful byproduct of doing this. Here's this documentation. You can look at it and get an idea of where you need to go. So it doesn't matter whether you're doing web or mobile web. Here you go. It's very, very similar. So this was a wonderful byproduct of being able to do this in a way that makes a lot of sense. Yes, it took time. But if you don't take the time now, believe me, you will be taking the time one way or another. It's just we did it up front. So these were the frameworks that we designed, that we did. So moving right along.
So David, these are 2, live demonstrations of how you are testing your mobile and your web application. Do you want to walk us through what we are, seeing right now running on the screen?
Sure. What it is this was an example that we did. So we have a mobile application that allows you as a customer of the bank to be able to log into your bank account and actually look at it. What you're seeing is actually 2 Apple iOS devices and 2 Android devices running the same test at the same time and getting results for all 4. Now, this is a win because of the fact is that, as I said earlier, and if you remember, we used to do it by manual. So you can imagine if you had a person trying to do these 4 devices, it would literally have to be in serial. You know, you do one device, then you do another device, you do another device, another device. Here, you're seeing it done in parallel. I'm doing this in 1/4 the time that I needed. Perfect example, and that I like to pull out is when they would do a smoke test, which was 79 test cases, it would take them 3 days. We were able to automate 60 of those tests because you can't automate everything. And you shouldn't automate everything. That's something that people don't understand about automation. Just because you could doesn't mean that you should. So we automated the test cases that we could. There were some manual test cases, and I'll get to those in a moment. And then we were able to run the test in 35 minutes. We cut down 3 days to 35 minutes on 4 devices. Think about that. Think about that win. The return on investment was well worth it. Now, like I said, you see only 3 because one of them already got done. And it's recorded. Perfecto allows us to record each device separately so we can look at those results. But as I was saying, you know, we did have some manual test cases. We could have automated them. But what happens is when you do that, some of them required you to go get an email, get information from an email, and input that. We could have automated it. The team looked at it and said, yeah, we could do it. But the problem with that is if the test fails, where did it really fail? Did it fail because you couldn't get the email? You couldn't get the information from the email? So as you see, what happens is that it becomes much more fragile. And we said that's not what we want. Because truly with automation, it should be able to run at any time. There should, you know, if I want to run it at midnight, I could kick it off at midnight. If I want to run it like 5 minutes from now, I could do that. That's what automation buys you. More time, always being able to test it. So, you know, this is finishing up. iOS devices were slower than Androids. It's just, we found that it was just the iOS, the way it did it. But this is showing you that the same tests are running and will run. And that's the beauty of using the tools that we did, and that's what we wanted. So now it's not a matter of we run it on iOS, now we run it on Android, we run it at the same time, and everything is wonderful. At the end, we get our result, we go, hey, we're working. So definitely a win-win for us. And I would like to point that it was our investigation and looking at what we need to do, I think really helped us, you know, get to this win-win. And this is where taking that time, writing down what you need to do and investigating it wins. So, and now you see the tests are all done, it's all happy, and our results are there, and now the team is done. So very, very big. So that's on real devices. Think about that. We just did 4 devices in the time frame that you saw. That's a wonderful thing. You know? So definitely a way to do it. Now, this, what you're going to see is being able to do multiple VMs like we did devices. There again, that's the beauty of it. You're seeing multiple browsers. We're doing our testing. It's not, I run it here, okay, it's passed. Now I got to run a second time. Now I can run a third time. We can run Chrome, IE, Firefox. You know, we can do these things, run them at the same time like we did mobile, and we can win again. Beauty. for our automation. Now we can put our testers where we need them, because that's what automation provides you if it's solid, if you can trust it. It does what I call, and people always laugh at it, it's called the monkey work. Doesn't require a lot of brains. You run it, it does it, and the people do the smart stuff. Let's work on the harder issues or the new features. Now, this also lends that if they do a release, you can run this test and go, you broke something, and be able to do it very, very quickly. Turnaround now becomes the time, and the time is spent doing the automation where you need it. So, just the time frame, and you see, we're finishing up. Boom, we're done. We did 3 browsers, 1/3 the time, and we get 3 results. Again, this is what automation is all about, and that's why taking the time, doing the proper tools, help you be more productive, and that's what it's all about. That's what automation buys you. But automation is a new buzzword, and so everyone tries to do it as quickly as they can, and they will fail at it. Now, the wonderful thing that we started doing was when we were doing this, we had codeless automation, which is something that Perfecto had. We started using it because not a lot of our testers could do coding, not at the beginning. And so how do you get these manual testers that were doing just running the script, okay, I read it and do it, how do you get them excited about doing it? Well, with codeless automation that Perfecto provided us, it allowed us to do a simple point and click. You saw it on the screen, you clicked on it, you added the data like login information, you created the flow, you saved the script, and then you could share it with another tester. They didn't have to know how to program in Java. They didn't know how to have an IDE installed on their device, but they could do this automation. They could share it with somebody, go, hey, look what I did. And now they're excited. And that's what we wanted. We wanted them excited. And doing this with this tool, they became really excited. And a number of them took classes in Java. That's how excited they got. So another big win. We helped them go from manual tester to learning how to program and do automation, but we as a bank benefited from it all. I mean, that's what we want. We want to be able to win, but also empower the engineers to do a good job. So that's what cordless automation provided and brought to us, was that ability to be able to do that. Now, that was the history. That was where we were. So now let's talk about the current state of testing at the bank. Okay? So with that, our current testing, now we just talked about codeless, so we're going to talk about it now. In my mind, what you're seeing on the screen is literally a flow chart of walking through the testing on the device. This is brilliant because it's much easier for them to understand it now. When you go to show it, other testers could go, oh, yeah, I see. I go from here, then I do this, then I do this. Again, when we bring new testers in, a lot of times we start them looking at some of the codeless automation so they get an idea of the flow. It's much easier for them to look at this and go, oh, to log in on my device, I go here, I do this, boom, I'm there. Then they can go and do it on the device, and the two correlate. Another win. Here we go. So we don't have as much training, one-on-one training as necessary, and I do that, but they feel better because they're not having somebody over their shoulder going, oh, yeah, you need to do this, you need to do this. They can read it and go, I've got this. A win, definitely. So let's move on. Now we did codeless. So another state is, as I said, we wanted to do continuous integration and continuous delivery. This is something that every organization wants to do. And so we were looking at this from the very beginning, and we did this. We worked with Perfecto. Perfecto worked with us, and we worked with the dev team to make sure that when dev does their development and they put in their code, we can start the process of testing it. Now, when we started out, like I said, our challenge was we were using offshore, and they did not have a repository in the bank that they could put the source code. So what we did was, and Perfecto helped us create the pipelines, we created a folder that says, here, you have access to this folder. Put your app here once you've compiled it. What happened was is that we had something, part of the chain for doing CI/CD would look at that folder. When something new appeared in it, which would be the new build that the developers had done, we would start the process of doing continuous integration. We would take that, we would run our scripts to call up a device, to install on a device, and then run the test. And then we would report the test. Eventually, when we moved one of the projects indoors, we also worked on getting the whole pipeline done so that when the team was done, and they could kick off the process. So we do that now, and it's wonderful because not only can we kick it off manually, we also have it set up to where it will start at a certain time, but also if something happens. And we have this running every night between the time that we here in the States stop working and before the team in India starts working. So we're always testing, which is what you want. So if anything happens, we get an immediate response, and then we can tell the development, here's what's going on. So now we are providing feedback to our developers much faster than what was happening, which, of course, makes all developers happy. Trust me. You want happy developers. So win-win. Definitely, if you're thinking of people doing automation, you need to think of this. Now, another thing is that trying to simulate the user, this has always been a challenge for QA. We try to do the mindset, and that's why QA is unique in that genre, because you have to think like a user doesn't know a lot of stuff. So they're going to do things that you normally would not do. So with the user simulation testing, the bank test engineering went beyond just functional tests of, okay, I'm going to log in. Does login work? We actually decided to use the user simulation testing that Perfecto provided us to really simulate what's going on in the real world. Now, what does that mean, simulate? Well, the things you encounter in the real world is the location. Where are you? The type of network that you're using, the preferred devices, the coverage. You may not have a very strong signal on your coverage, your Wi-Fi coverage. You might have other things running in the background, other networks running on the background, other processes running on the background, degraded network conditions, conflicting apps. You might be trying to do something and you get a call or somebody texts you. How do you simulate that? Well, normally what you used to do is you used to do it manually. The one example I like to cite about this is how do you test, something to think about for people to think about, is if your app will allow you to download something, okay? So how do you test that if you're trying to download something and your network goes away for whatever reason? You're walking around or you walk into a room that doesn't have coverage. How do you test that the app doesn't blow up or something like that? Well, you really couldn't. You had to try to find that situation. Or what you do is you walk over to your microwave, you start your download, you put your device in the microwave, and shut the microwave door. Don't start it, but you shut the microwave door. What you've just done is created an environment where the network signal can't get into your device. And then you can look to see what happens. Those are the type of things you had to do. Now, with the user simulation, you don't have to do that. That's the beauty of it. They have ways of being able to simulate these conditions to where you can run the same tests with 3G, 4G. Oh, let's say you have only 2 bars of network. Or let's say that you have other applications using the network in the background. Now I can just set that up and run the test. Or I can have a whole suite of tests that does that for me. That's beautiful. That's important. It's very important to be able to do that type of thing before you send it out to the customer. Because trust me, the customer will find it. They're good at it. So,
and David,
moving right along.
If I may double click on one word from your slide, I will click on the 4th bullet, which is coverage. And I think that coverage is, the title of this entire slide, because if you think about like a nice test plan for your mobile native application, this is everything that you just put on the slide, because coverage is not just the different smartphones and tablets that your end users are using to access your banking applications. It's also the locations they are operating in, the network conditions, the multiple applications that are running in the background and competing against resources, incoming events, security pop-ups, calls, text messages. So this is, in my mind, a nice subset or way of looking at a test plan for a mobile native application that you just put on the slide, and it starts with the word coverage in my mind. So this is a really good indication of how to build your test plan in today's reality.
No, you are dead right on that. Thank you for bringing that up. No, that's perfect. And I think that nowadays we need to start looking at this, and Perfecto provides that. And that's wonderful, because now you don't have to do as much work. No, what you said was perfect. So moving right along. Yeah. So one of the important things that I always laugh about, and I always get laughs from people, is, when we talk about test analysis and test reporting, you can do all these wonderful tests, all these brilliant things, and as you heard Eran talk about, being able to simulate all of this. But if I can't give anybody the data, it doesn't really do me much good. So this is where Perfecto provides it. This is what's called the heat map, which is really, I think, is wonderful, because if I run a set of tests on a number of devices, I can now get an idea of where my area might be. Where am I suffering the most problems very quickly? And you look at it and you go, okay, green, I don't have to worry about that, but I've got a red here, what's that? So now my focus is, boom, I'm right on that. And that's important, because like I said, we thought about building our own test frame, but reporting was one of the things that we wanted. So that meant that we would have to build that. Perfecto walked in and said, hey, we've got you covered. And this is one of the examples of having this covered. I would never have thought of this. I mean, when I saw this, I was like, all right, this is great. They also provide, let's go to the next slide and show some of the other. Here's the report library. This is what I think was most important, in that I love showing the executives at the bank that I work at when they come in there, because I can really show them the number of test cases. You can see you have a test case. You can see the history of that test case. How has it been run? You see it's either green, or you see, if you look the third one down, you see that it's got 4 red and then 1 green, which meant that previously it had a failure. Now it's not. And that's wonderful. I mean, that's great. I don't have to sit there and try to go, well, I need to look at it to see what it was. It tells me what it is. You see, it tells you the device. Boom. It tells you the OS. Again, a win. These and the date that it runs. So now you can see the history of it, which is something a lot of reporting libraries don't have, but it's very visual, because we're very visual people. You can see the total up above, how many. You can see where the failures are. It tells you how many failures, how many pass. That's brilliant. This is wonderful. This is what we need, and this is what I think every organization really needs to look at. So moving right along is from there, the report, and as you saw with that, like that one test case, this is what it looks like when you really get down to it. This is what Perfecto provides you, is the ability to look at each step and see what's going on. One of the other things I love about Perfecto that a lot of tools don't have is not only do you get screenshots, but you get video as well. Now, for some people go, well, why do you need video? For the very reason that if you have a developer come back and goes, and I'm sure anybody who's ever done QA hears this, well, it doesn't happen on my system. With the video, you can then say, watch what happens. And the developer can watch the steps that are being done and then see where the problem lies. And more than once, I've had a developer tell me, well, we don't see it on our system. And I've sent them the video, and they're like, oh, now we know where the issue is. So that's something that is very, very important. Screenshots are great, but having the video so they can watch what's going on. It could be a timing issue. Could be network. Here again, this provides you that tool that makes your life better. So, as I said, test analysis, test reporting is so, so important. Now, another wonderful thing that Perfecto has is what's called Perfecto Connect. Now, as I talked about earlier, one of the problems we had with our development is they're not having access to the same devices that we've got. With Perfecto Connect, it allows a very secure network connection that supports testing on mobile and web apps hosted on the local development network, which means that we at the bank have 38 devices. We also have some hardware devices, but with Perfecto Connect, I make sure that the development team has access to those devices that my testers use, which now we eliminated one of the problems of not having similar devices. This is very, very important to think about. It's an open direct connection between our lab devices and the network backbone server or staged app that's not available in any other development, in any other environments, which for a bank is very, very important. We have a connection right to the lab, and we worked with our information security to whitelist that. And because it's now part of the whole integrated environment, our CI jobs will work just as well. And we've been using that because we have a Boston office that was doing some development. And by using this, we gave them access to that. And now our developers can now have access to the devices that we've got. They don't have to sit there and worry about, do I have access to a Pixel 3? Do I have access to a iPhone 11? I can say, I've got an iPhone 11, which I do, on as one of my devices. Here, schedule it, then you can do what you need to do. So this allows us to now bring development into our inner circle, and now we become a much more integrated team. Something very, very important nowadays with our development cycles being cut short, with how fast-paced our life is. With this, the team can have access to it, whatever. And the beauty of Perfecto is that it doesn't matter where you are. Our offshore team in India uses Perfecto. And because of that, we now have better communication. We don't have to sit there and worry about not having devices. What device do you need? We make sure that the devices are available for them and for our developers. That's a win for everybody. So now the bank can develop faster. We can get it tested faster. We can get it tested more securely. And also, we get it out to our customers. And we have happy customers. And we all know that's really what's important. So, the key values like I was talking about is going back and forth. We have support for these for our developers. We fit, any interactive, automated CI. It fits. Perfecto Connect was, and some people may laugh, it's a godsend because I don't have to sit there and try to be on the phone or try to project the screen from my device to the developer so they can see what's going on. They can see it for themselves. They have the ability to run the test script if they want to run it. The nice thing about Perfecto Connect, there's no installation. You don't have to put a new client application on your device. And for a bank, that can be a problem. Our laptops are secure. We're not allowed to install stuff on it. And you shouldn't have to. That's one of the things I love about Perfecto is it's not necessary. I can also associate multiple devices with that same tunnel. You don't have to have one tunnel for this device, another tunnel for that device, another tunnel for that. I have the Perfecto tunnel, and they have these devices. I can do Mac OS, I can do Windows, I can do Linux workstations. I got it covered. It doesn't matter what device I need. And the beauty of it is for debugging and troubleshooting. It supports all of this. Supports Charles Proxy, which is what you use on a Mac for doing that type of thing. That's important because that's supporting modern tools. And the last one is the most important, is allowing debugging over real devices from your local network backbone environment. This is very important for your developers. Being able to do it right on the device. That is such a win, and our developers were so excited when they saw this, were able to do it. So, with that said, are there any questions or answers I can, give for you that you might have?
A few questions that were already coming in. So first, before we go to the questions, I just want to thank you, David, for this, presentation. I think that it was very insightful. It includes a lot of, tips and strategy-related items that I'm sure others online will definitely benefit from. And, just jumping to the first question, which is a nice segue to your presentation ending, is, what's your advice to teams who are starting their mobile and web test automation journey today after being, so many years in the journey and after implementing the strategy that you have just, presented? What would be your high-level advice to these guys who are just getting started?
That's a very good question. My advice to them is, number one, do your research. Understand that automation is a software development project. Start with that from the very beginning. A lot of times what happens is it's always an afterthought. Automation is a software development process. You have to have dedicated resources. That's one of the things that you need going into it. My advice is you have to have dedicated resources. You need to do your research. You need to have your goals. Like I talked about what we did, have our goals, because you want to avoid the pitfalls. Perfect example is not accounting for the percentage of test cases that need to be manual. One of the issues that I see a lot when people start to automation is, we're going to automate everything. And my first thought is, no, you're not. Because, like I said before, some just cannot be automated, some shouldn't be automated. Think about the importance of return on investment. That's what it really comes down to. You also have to, when you're doing automation, account for maintenance. This is very important because what happens is when you start an automation process is you have managers, and believe me, I've had them say this, well, once I have automation, then I don't need as many testers. And that's a fallacy because what they see is I have all this money for the manual testers. When I go automation, I don't need as many, so I don't need as much money. What they're not taking into account is for maintenance. The money just moves from one area to another. So that's very, very important to do. Not syncing the not understanding the tools that are needed for automation, like Perfecto. Do your research. Find out, is it for you? What do you need to do? Do you have the resources to do it? Do you have people that can program? Those are all important things that need to be taken into consideration when you're starting to do an automation process. And then, as I said, having that goal, you need that goal to determine, are you successful as you go along the way? That's the wonderful thing, that when we did this and we worked with Perfecto, they helped us look at those goals and go, yes, here's where this is. Here's how this does it. So that we could feel good about where we were. Because automation is very time intensive. It can be very intense in the energy that goes along with it because everybody wants it. But how do you show management that you're really succeeding? Those are the things that you need to look at.
So, David, that's actually the next question that someone online was asking. I will just use his word or her word. So do you have any cross-team metrics or KPIs to measure such success? So you're just saying that, to be successful, you have the goals and stuff. Are you using any kind of KPIs or measurements in the bank to know, are you on track with succeeding in the goals that you achieve, et cetera?
Yeah, what we did was some of the measurements that we would do is we would look at the percentage of tests that need to stay manual. We would look at making sure that, the maintenance that needs to be done, the return on investment over a certain period of time would be that, because those are the KPIs that we want to look at. A lot of people go, how many test cases did you automate? You can use that, but there's a problem with that because that's not really good, because now you're driving people to want to automate everything so they look good. How many tests pass, how many tests fail. People use that as, well, when I ran the automation, so many passed, so many failed. That's a false KPI too, because I don't know what your test cases are. They could all be UI test cases. So they may all pass. Well, yeah, I did 120 test cases that ran and they all passed. They were all UI and they weren't that difficult, but they passed. So that can lead you to a false sense of security. So you really need to look at,
the value.
The value of it. Automating new tests, how is that going? How long does it take you to do? Is it, the other thing that is good to do is looking at factoring in team members who are doing manual and automated. That's important as well. Looking at being able to automate regression test cases. Because a lot of times people will kind of do that, do the testing now, but also when they have the time to do, well, let's automate some of these older test cases. That's all nice and fine, but you're missing the point. This is what I call prior test cases. And how fast can you integrate them into your regression suite? The faster you can do, the better return on investment that you've got. Because now more and more of those tests are being done automated instead of having a person do it. So now you can start looking at new features. So now you can start bringing in the new test cases. That's important to do. Also looking at the higher complexity test cases. How many are you doing for that? That's important. How many coverage on environments? How many have you got? Reduction of defect leaks. I mean, this has a twofold, because the tests are there, and we have to remember that automation is like walking through a minefield. And as you walk through the minefield the first time or first couple times, you're clearing out those mines. You're taking care of the defects as you find. But we also need to remember, people need to remember that automation is going to do the same thing over and over and over and over again. If you run the same tests over and over and over again, eventually you're not going to find any more tests. And that can lead to a false sense of, hey, we're looking good. That's the reason why I said incorporating new test cases into your suite is very important. So being able to look at that is what's important. But another benefit is that forces development to do better checking on their code. So now, before they give you code, they're looking at what they're doing. They're padding up and shoring up their infrastructure, their unit test, before they hand it to QA. Everybody wins in there. So that's some of the KPIs that I look at, the costs and all of that. So that's making sure that you have proper test coverage. It's an interesting topic that we don't have time for now, but we could spend at least another 45 minutes on talking about all the different types of KPIs or measurements for success and whether they're useful or not.
Definitely. And talking about KPIs, the next question that I had was, bringing a solution to the bank like Perfecto, a cloud solution, and you mentioned earlier the ROI. So what was your recommendation, or what is your recommendation around, selling such a tool internally, to managers, but also across different teams? You mentioned developers and testers that can benefit. So how would you go about, selling such a solution internally?
Basically, this is where, if you go to the beginning of the slide again, this is where you look at the challenges that you've got, and you look at and especially when you're dealing with managers, you're looking at what are they expecting? What are they looking at a way of solving the problem? And what you do is you work with, especially with tools, you look at how do those tools address the concerns that the managers have? How do those tools address the concerns the developer has? How do those tools address the concern QA has? A lot of times what happens is you go, that's a cool tool, I want it. And eventually what happens is somebody buys it, and then now they don't really have anybody to sort of help them kind of work with it. So if you're looking at bringing in an internal tool, tool to internal, and what's good to do is to sit there and go, okay, let's bring everybody together, say this is what we're trying to achieve. What are the concerns from people? Don't keep everybody isolated. It's a team effort. I've seen too many times where tools were thought to be cool, and they've got it in there, and they did not do their research, and because of that, there were things they couldn't do internally because of infrastructure, or people didn't have the knowledge, or when you really looked at what was needed, it really didn't address the really important things. So include everybody in your meetings. Find your challenges, talk to them, do your investigation, and then together make an intelligent decision.
Yeah, that's a great advice, and I think that's a great summary to this webinar. We have a bunch of other questions that we will be addressing offline because of the time. But again, I just wanted to thank you, David, for your time and for this insightful webinar. And to those of you online, thank you for participating. And we'll see you in the next webinar. Thanks a lot again, David.
Thank you so much, and everybody have a good automation journey.